Hey, good afternoon. Happy Friday, March 20th. Mark Milam here, your mortgage professional. Let's get right to it. The third week in a row here of not great news in the world of mortgage interest rates. A lot of this coming on the heels of the Fed meeting, which happened on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week with the Fed policy statement coming at 2 p.m. on Wednesday. Really, no surprises there. The Fed didn't cut rates, they didn't hike rates. No one expected them to do either. The policy statement itself really began to allude to uncertainty. I think the Fed chairman mentioned the word uncertain 7 times, particularly around the impacts of the war in Iran, the impact on the price of oil, but also the impact of tariffs. He noted that tariffs take anywhere from 8 to 12 months to move through the system, and that a lot of the tariffs that have been implemented really haven't even been felt yet in the economy. He went on to say that tariffs are inflationary. Listen, bonds hate inflation, mortgages are just long-term bonds. So all of this news, whether it's the spike in the price of oil or the ongoing tariff situation, are not doing anything to help the overall inflation picture or mortgage rates. But really here, the bugaboo comes with the fact of the war in Iran. It has just continued to evolve into what some were saying. We don't really know how long this conflict is going to go now. What is the definition of success? What is the definition of winning? If we're there to prevent a nuclear Iran, have we not gotten enough evidence that we've done that yet? When will we? How will we? Meanwhile, the Strait of Hormuz is shut down effectively for most of the, or for 20% of the world's oil. That has caused a shock through energy prices. And now we've got Iran lashing out to neighboring countries, doing damage to natural gas refineries and other oil refineries. This is doing nothing for us positively in terms of energy costs. And all that is translating into negative news for mortgage pricing. In fact, if we go back to February 27th, just 3 weeks ago, we can see that the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate was in the fives and now are mid fives, and we find ourselves now in the low sixes. We've given up 5/8 in rate, 0.625% in rate in 3 weeks. That is a huge move. That is a huge move in the wrong direction. The only silver lining here is this is a singular event, right? This event is really what's caused the issue. And as soon as the event is over with, presumably, as long as there is peace in the Middle East, relatively speaking, we should see a return to those really good levels. A lot of the fundamentals are still there, but we're just dealing with this energy shock as it pertains to mortgage rates. The Fed also making no bones about it. The Fed is saying that they fear that Fed rate cuts are off the table for the remainder of the year, and in fact, we have a 50% chance of a Fed rate hike now sometime before October. We weren't even talking about Fed rate hikes before. I'm going to scroll down and I've highlighted some sections. The sell-off in bonds, meaning mortgage rates are going higher, came after Iran and Israel exchanged strikes overnight, with Iran launching new attacks against energy sites in Kuwait and elsewhere in the Persian Gulf. With no end in sight to the escalation, investors are positioning for a more hawkish stance from the Fed as higher global oil prices reshape the economic output. The market removed basically every rate cut from this year and is now pricing in odds of a rate hike. If we go over here to the actual Fed rate watch, you can see now 89.7% chance that the Fed is going to hold the Fed funds rate steady in late April, and about a 10% chance we're going to see them actually hike the Fed funds rate. That is not the news that we need. Listen, there's a lot of people calling on the Fed. And why would you say what you said? And I do think it's a little bit of a policy issue to go out there and start talking about rate hikes now and worsening the outlook for the short-term interest rates at least. But at the same time, the president's not going to find any, friends over there in the Fed chairman seat, at least not right now, while Jerome Powell has that seat. Jerome Powell's been the subject of public ridicule on social media from the president. He's also suffered under a subpoena for his handling of the renovations to the Federal Reserve building. So I'm not surprised to see Jerome Powell pushing back a little bit and not providing the president with a lot of safe haven, at least from the Federal Reserve perspective. You also have to remember that this Federal Reserve, this very Fed chairman, got it wrong coming out of the pandemic, and they held interest rates too low for too long. And we saw 9% inflation as a result of the stimulus coming out of the pandemic. They do not want to mess up again. And so if it means holding rates higher for longer or pushing rates back up to get inflation under control, I don't think they're going to hesitate to do that, because that would be a very big stain on their legacy to allow inflation to continue to escalate without getting it under control. We are facing an interesting thing in this country of, are we getting close to the dreaded S word? And that S word is stagflation. Stagflation is rising inflation with decreasing or no rise in output, meaning, what do you do if you're a Fed chairman or if you're a Fed member in that circumstance? How do you fight inflation yet not continue to destroy growth? It's a very challenging place to be, and not a place that the Federal Reserve really wants to be. So look for them to embrace Fed rate hikes, or at least the talk of it, in order to hopefully issue whatever kind of pressure they can issue to the market right now to keep inflation in check. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, listen, nothing that the Fed really does in terms of borrowing money does anything for the price of oil, but it does slow down other investment that might lead to other inflationary pressures. This is a really complex situation, but driven by a largely singular event. And we remain hopeful that that event will come to a swift conclusion. If not in the month of March, then in the month of April. If I can be of any service to you over the weekend, don't hesitate to reach out. Mark.Milam at highlandmtg.com.